Data security is very important. When we have data, which user has access or which group of user can see is one of the key decisions that affects the security of of our Salesforce org and app. So data security is very important. Let's say if you are building a recruiting app to help manage open position candidates and job applications, you'll have to store confidential data such as social security number, salary amount, or and applicant reviews that only some type of user should see. So with the Salesforce platform flexible or layered sharing model, it's easy to assign different data sets to different sets of user. So you can balance the security and convenience and reduce the risk of being the data stolen or being misused, and still make sure all users can easily access the data they need. Okay, data security is very important, and with Salesforce platform, we will be able to provide a secured access to data. So levels of data access. There's organization, object level, field level, and record level. Organization, for your whole organization, you can maintain a list of authorized user, set password policies, and limit logins to certain hours and location. So objects, by setting permission on a particular type of object, you can prevent a group of users from creating, viewing, editing, or deleting any records of that object. You can control this by using permission set or a profile. We'll discuss more about profile and permission in the next slides. And objects, for object, I can give an example of an object permission to ensure that for a job application, ensure that interviewer can view positions and job applications but not edit or delete them. So field, you can restrict access to certain fields even if a user has access to the object. So example would be you can make the salary field on a position object invisible to interviewers but to visible to a hiring manager and recruiter. That would be an example of a field level access where you want certain fields should be accessible and to certain users. You can make that. And record level access, you can restrict access to certain fields even if a user has access to the object. So example would be an interviewer can see and edit her own reviews but not the reviews of other interviewers. That would be an example of a record level access where you can restrict certain records. Okay, and now let's move on to the next slide, which is control access to the orgs. So manage users. Every Salesforce user is identified by a username, password, and a single profile. Every user should have a username and a password, and only one profile can be associated with a user. And there are certain password policies to make sure there is a data security. You can configure several settings to ensure that user passwords are strong and secure. Password policies will be such as the amount of time before all user password expire and the level of complexity of the password, and user password expiration. You can expire all the password, and you can except for the users with the password never expire permission and user password resets. You can reset certain user password, login attempts, and lockout period. If a user is locked out due to too many failed login attempts, you can unlock the password person access. You can unlock those access. So, and you can also control access to the org by using specifying trusted IP ranges for the org. Anytime you can log in from a different IP address, you'll be asked to verify your identity, typically having a verification code. You can bypass this step for trusted IP ranges. So example that your user should be able to log in without entering a verification code. So whenever they are in the office, so that would be an example. If so, next one is restrict login access by IP address using profiles. So suppose that certain users shouldn't be able to log in if they are using an IP address outside of the office. So restrict login access by time. So certain users, if you decide your call center employees really only need to look at customer data while they're taking phone calls, that's 9 to 5, you can make it so that they can't log in during evenings and weekends. This is a typical examples of how to control access to the org by restricting login access by time and login access by IP address using profile and specifying trusted IP ranges for the org. Data access. This slide can help you to understand what objects can a user see, what fields on those objects can a user see, which record should be hidden by default, and what exception should we make. Say for example, what object can a user see? That's object level security, like candidate object and position object. Suppose a user should have access to candidate object and position object, we can make that possible using object permissions, using profile or permission set. And if you want to remove the, if you don't want to give offer permission, you can remove that. And what fields on these objects can a user see? Field level security, first name, last name, you can control the fields level security. And you can also you can mention which record should be hidden. That's organization by default. This is a baseline. You can open up the access. We'll be discussing in the next slides how we can mention organization by default. So your organization by default is private, so you can open up the access like using role hierarchy or sharing rules or manage sharing. You can give certain access to certain records, like as in this example, user can have access to position controller, Miami, and position junior. Like that, we can open up the record access. Okay. Control access to objects. So you can control access to object using permission set and profiles. Permission set, the simplest way to control data access is to set permission on a particular type of objects. You can control whether a group of users can create, view, edit, or delete any records of that object. So you can set object permissions with profiles of permission set. Each user is assigned one profile. Users can be assigned one or more permission sets. So use profile to restrict access. A profile is a collection of settings and permission. Profile settings determine which data the user can see, and permission determines what the user can do with that data. Okay, a user profile will contain certain settings as well as what tab they can access and what object and other setting details will be there, whereas it also contains permissions with respect to that object, like whether for they have read access or edit access. So you can give a basic profile to a user, and then on top of that you can add a permission set. So minimum permission and settings, then you can provide a particular type of permission set to grant more permission as needed. The combination of profile and permission sets gives you a great deal of flexibility. Okay, a user's profile determines the objects they can access and the things they can do with any object record, such as create, edit, or delete. Permission set will grant additional permissions and access setting to a user. So you can give a profile. For every user they should have a profile. Along with profile, if you want to give additional access, that can be given using a permission set. So control access to a fields. So you want to control access to a field, that is who should access those field. As an example I mentioned earlier, the example of where you have a salary field which should not be visible to uh, it should not be visible to an interviewer, but it should be visible to a hiring manager or a recruiter for a position object. There's a position object in a salary field. It should be visible to a hiring manager and recruiter, but it doesn't make sense to an interviewer. So it doesn't need to know the salary field. So it should not be visible for an interviewer. That kind of, in that scenarios, we have to have field permissions where we have to restrict certain field level security. So in that cases, we can use field permissions, whether a user can see, edit, delete the value for a particular field on an object. You can restrict field access with a profile. You can apply field settings by modifying profiles of permission set. You can also do it at the object level. When you in the setup in the object manner, when you go to that field, you can do the field permissions where you can give the edit or delete, which you can change the values. And control access to records. So organization by default, this is the basic, that is the baseline. Specify the default value of access user should have to each other's record. Suppose for a position object, you have organization wide default as private. Then you can open up the access using role hierarchy, sharing rules, and manual sharing. But you cannot give, but if you give organization wide default as public read, right, you can't give a private access to using role hierarchy. You can't restrict it, you can only open up the access. So organization by default is the default level of access user can have. Then will be role hierarchy, like ensures managers have access to all the records which is subordinate has. So it just follows the role hierarchy. The higher level manager should have access to all the records of his subordinates. Each role in the hierarchy represents a level of data access that a user or group of user needs, and sharing rules or automatic exceptions to organization by default for a particular group of users to give them access to records they don't own or can't normally see. You can give access to using sharing rules. So for a particular group of users, you can give access to records. Okay, and then manual sharing, you want to the owner of the record want to give a read and edit permission to a record to another users. You can do it using manual sharing. And thus we covered how we can protect the data and have the data security at different levels, like object level, organization level, field level, and record level. Thank you.